Born in 1980 in Fortaleza, Brazil, Wilson Bastos has a bachelor's degree in international business and an MBA from the University of Texas at San Antonio. He also has a PhD in marketing at the University of Arizona. Wilson does research in consumer happiness, word of mouth, experiential and material purchases, and branding. Some of his favorite things to do are painting, cooking, and seeing Formula One. How and when were you sure that this would be the direction of your professional life?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Alex. There's not a key moment that you say, okay, this is the way. You kind of start envisioning it because of things that happen in your life. So academia started to appeal to me when I went for vacation to Brazil, my home country. I was at the time living in the US and was learning English and could go to Brazil and start teaching English to people who were interested in learning English. And I felt this is something that appeals to me, to transfer to other people knowledge and enable them to grow and travel abroad and read in a different language. So that was very appealing to me, to see the growth of other people. Secondly, when I was doing my MBA at the University of Texas in San Antonio, I had the fortune to work for professors at the time, and I was helping them to conduct their own research. I would go to the lab and collect data for them. I would code the data, I would help them interpret the data. And so I was sort of immersing myself in research without kind of knowing that eventually would become, my career. Yeah. But it was so much fun, the intellectual engagement. I didn't go for academia right after that. I actually went and worked for Black & Decker for a few years. But it got to a point that I liked to work at Black & Decker. Great company to work, they give you great training, but I felt that I missed the intellectual engagement of academia, of learning constantly, and especially transferring that knowledge on forwards to other people. So I just called one of my professors that I had worked for and said, you know what, I missed the intellectual engagement. What do you think? It was easy for her to do the brainwashing and convince me that, yes, that's what I should do. And so that's how it
So here you are.
Here I am, yeah.
So thinking back then to an earlier part of your career or life, what would you have told yourself, a 20-year-old version of yourself, advice-wise?
Advice-wise, I think this question kind of begs the answer of what would you have done differently, right? Mm-hmm. I think everybody should look back at their lives and also recognize the goods. And I think one positive perhaps is to have the courage at the age of 18 to leave your parents and your country and your friends to go study abroad. And that's what I did when I was 18, went to the United States to learn English. Was supposed to be in the US for 5 months, ended up staying for 15 years. So I think that's one positive that I would say, hey, good job, you went for it. Now, what I would have done differently, which I think is at the heart of your question, is risk more, okay? Accept mistakes, go for it. Because I think at the age of 20, and I tell this to my students, at the age of 20, the mistakes you make, unless they're big mistakes, they are unlikely to compromise the rest of your career. And we learn so much from mistakes. Actually, the highlights of my career are the mistakes, are coming out of mistakes. And I think when you're 20, you can risk, you can open companies with your friends, you can fail, you can open another company, fail again, and your credit score is not gonna go down.
How has consumer behavior changed across the years?
It has changed. And interesting you're asking this question, because in the PhD program, I had the fortune to have Sidney Levy as one of my professors. Sidney Levy in the 50s and 60s partnered up with Philip Kotler, who writes the textbook that we use in every marketing class around the world. They were friends at the University of Chicago. And they were the first people to ever write about the concept of brand image that we now talk in every business class around the world. In the 50s, they wrote about that. And Sidney was my professor in the PhD program. We became friends and we wrote a paper actually on the history of brand and branding. How is it that brands come about? If you think about it, brands were really the idea of burning slaves and burning animals to say that cow is mine, that other cow belongs to Alex. Branding was done by the means of burning to symbolize possession of something. And what are brands nowadays? Totally different things. Brands are entities that Alex and I use to communicate who we are and who we are not. They're entities of communication, of identity. Now, you ask me how consumer behavior has changed. Marketing, if you think about it, at that time in the 1950s, 1960s, marketing was really about distribution. Marketing was mostly about logistics of basic things, running from coffee to soybean to rice and so on. That's what marketing scholars studied, how they could get products around the world and around the US mostly. Marketing has then benefited from mostly psychology to try to understand, move from processes of logistics to come into the mind of the consumer, to understand how the consumer processes information, buys their stuff, the happiness that they get from what they buy. We understand very much how to do good things in marketing. We understand how to get consumers to donate, to recycle, to save money, and to make purchases that will make them happier. And that goes a little bit into my research too. I think one final piece to answer your question of how consumer has changed is that in the beginning, marketing was really seen as an authority. So much so that consumers would watch commercials as if they were sources of information. Marketers told us what we're supposed to do. Not so nowadays, huh? Not so. Social media and throughout the years, the consumer has gained a voice, has gained power. And so we have seen a change, a movement of authority and a movement of power from the marketing individual and from the company to a more perhaps diverse and a more democratic division of power, if you will.
That makes sense. Much of your research focuses on the area of material and experiential purchases. Could you tell us a little bit about your research?
Sure. That research, if you think about it, most of our disposable income, and when I say we, I'm referring to us as consumers, we spend our money either to buy material things, to buy furniture, to buy clothing, to buy jewelry and other material things, or we spend to do things, to go to the movies, take a trip, go to the restaurant, visit a zoo, or so on. So we spend on material or experiential things. My research rests mostly in the area of which type of purchase gives us more happiness. And yes, you and I get more happiness from the money that we spend if we buy experiences than if we buy material things. And most of my research is to understand why that is. So I've looked at the idea that experiential purchases have greater conversational value, meaning you and I are more likely to get together with friends and tell them about our experiences, the trips that we went or the visits that we did to museums, than we are to share about our material things. We talk to people more about our experiences than we talk to people about our objects. And this interaction about telling people about our experiences increases our happiness. Interestingly, this is the consumer side, right? But what about the people who sell objects and experiences to us? Like, do salespeople get more happiness from their jobs if what they sell is experience, so say a hotel manager, than if what they sell is an object, say a furniture store manager? We find that yes, people who sell experiences to consumers report that they gain more happiness from their jobs than the people who sell material things. So I've been in this domain trying to understand these two types of expenditures that people make and how that impacts not only the consumer but also the people who are selling it.
Very interesting. So then in your opinion, what else should people do to be happier?
Besides buying more experiences and fewer objects, right? Yeah, so for the consumer, that's the primary advice I would give. However, we know from research, and a lot of this research comes from social psychology, a lot of it comes from marketing as well. We know that there are two things that we can decide to do that can increase our happiness. There are things we do not have control of. So for example, part of your happiness and my happiness comes from the genes that we inherit from our parents. We know how to play up with genes nowadays to make people healthier later in life. We don't know yet how to play up with genes to make people happier later in life. Not yet, at least. The other things that increase our happiness, they're beyond our control. Okay? So our personality, for example, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. But there are these two behaviors that we can deliberately engage in that will make you and I happier. And that is being appreciative of what other people do to us. That is the behavior of gratitude, saying thank you to people who did something good to us, and a generosity. So being generous to other people, giving away, giving your time and your money away instead of spending on yourself.
What are some key moments of your life and career that you would consider to be aha moments?
I think aha moments come to primarily at moments of change, huh? Mm-hmm. And again, at the age of 18, deciding to move to another country, that was an aha moment. But I think there is a bigger moment there. When I got to the US, about 3 months into the experience, I remember I had a deep feeling of missing Brazil and missing my parents. And for 6 straight days, I felt the feeling of saudade, which is the feeling of missing. And I would call my mother every single of those 6 days. And my mother would always say, look, you can come back. There is a structure here. Will you be welcome? We'll welcome you with open arms. Up to the 6th day when I said, thank you for saying that. But I think what I need to hear from you is that I should stay. Motivate me to stay. That was a game changer. I don't know where they came from, but that changed the dynamics between me and the people, my mom, my mother, and my father, who gave me this psychological support to keep persisting and staying. Moving to Portugal was another major moment. The US taught me a lot, and I think the people who might be watching this might have the experience or might have the opportunity to experience international, to go international. And if they do, I think a message that I'd like to leave to them is that living internationally appears way more difficult before you go than after you go. Because once you get there, you start to learn the system. You start to work hard and things start to go well and feed on itself. You find a job, you get a promotion, you get more money, you don't no longer need support from your parents, and I'm speaking to the students at this point. So things the positive just keeps on feeding up to the point that you say, wow, I can stay longer. I don't need to stay 5 months, I can stay 15 years.
You build a life.
You build a life. And as long as you're willing to work hard and work with honesty, most places around the world, you will be rewarded. But again, moving to Portugal was a key moment because the US opened up my mind, and that first experience of anybody, and I hope our students do that very often. But the second one opens it further. Going abroad gives you a new pair of glasses to see the world. Then imagine getting a second new pair of glasses. It's beautiful. You see the world in a new and way more colorful way. You see much more of the world, and your experience of life becomes much richer.
Rose-tinted lenses, as they say.
Yes, in some ways.
If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
Hunger and war. I'm sorry, US for one. I think they're connected.
They are, yeah.
But those, I think, are the two that we should strive to change. Poverty is the primary one, I think, in war, and I think to change war or to eliminate war, hopefully one day we'll get there. Steven Pinker says in his book, The Better Angels of Our Time, I think is the title of the book. Steven Pinker from Harvard says that we have never lived a time of such peace as we are right now, which is great. If he is correct, it's great. It means we're progressing. And I think we should keep on going that way. But I think to lower the probability of war, the key word for me is tolerance. And that we can do. We need to be aware of it, and we can do it. Poverty is a bit more complex, I think. But if I could change, that's what I would do.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your life experiences and insights with us and the students at Católica and prospective students as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for doing this, and thanks to the university for doing this and promoting this. Hopefully some of this will be useful, especially to the young ones. We'll get some courage to go abroad and explore in risk.